And now, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. Not many people have resumes that list NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. European Command, and United States presidential candidate. But General Wesley Clark has been all of these. A former member of General Clark's staff recently said of him, "He is one of the most patriotic people I know, and I mean Boy Scout patriotic." General Clark's leadership goes well beyond the military. Since his retirement from the Army, he's been a staunch advocate of clean energy, calling innovation and investment in this field mission critical for U.S. national security. Today, he's going to speak about challenges in foreign investment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Wesley Clark.
Bill, thanks for that kind introduction, and Chris, thank you and the Secretary for sponsoring this forum, and thanks to all of you for being here. I think this is a very important opportunity to bring this community together in a way it probably hasn't been before, because we're all in this pursuit of these wonderful opportunities, a chance to do well while doing good, helping other countries, bringing value to our investors and companies, and reaching out person to person around the world to build a community of shared values. All of that can be done, and it can be done in the 21st century in a way it's never been done before. But there are some great challenges that go along with the opportunities. I want to talk about a couple of the challenges, but before I get into the hard stuff, let me just tell you why I'm so excited about this sector. So I heard about this Israeli fighter pilot who'd spent 20 years in Africa. I flew over to meet him. I had dinner with him in Milan. I've been studying underdeveloped economies and how to get economic growth since I was a cadet at West Point. I studied it at Oxford. It was my principal area at Oxford. Of course, I went to Vietnam, and there was AID and all of the challenges of Vietnamization. And then after that, the United States forswore nation building. I never really believed that. And sure enough, then there we were in the 90s working Haiti and Bosnia and Kosovo. And so the ability to reach out and help other people and develop economies has always been a key part of U.S. national security. But more than that, it's a key part of how we relate to the world and how we fulfill our obligations as good people. So I met the Israeli fighter pilot. He said, "I've got this fantastic program in Angola that builds agricultural communities." I said, "Well, I'd like to see this." And so he flew me down to Angola, and we looked at it. And it was the first real successful development project I'd seen in 40 years. It was based on the Israeli Moshav model, and it was based on the profit motive. And what he had done is, with the help of the Angolan government, they created a bunch of agricultural villages, given each family a house, 3 hectares of land. Some people got 100 chickens, some people got 5 cows. There was an Israeli agricultural development team there. They put in the agribusiness piece of it so they could pull together the products of the gardens that were developed, the meat, the dairy. Everything was high-tech. They'd done the market surveys. Luanda was importing all of its food, and this community of 800 homes set out into 10 different villages. Each village, its own school, its own church, its own adult literacy program. So it was a complete development program. But the most amazing thing about it was not the fact that they'd taken people who'd never farmed and raised them from a subsistence level to an annual family income of about $6,000 a year. They had taken people who'd never farmed and they'd educated them. So I went to George's house, George and Mary. George was a sergeant, boy soldier, 20 years in the military. Mary had no education. Now George has his own computer. It's got a small house, he and Mary, 3 kids. The kids are all in school. Mary's in school. George is finishing high school. George is also at night teaching 4th grade. George has constant electric power. He bought a refrigerator with an ice maker. He hired one of the local refugees to sell ice on the road. He hires another guy to walk his cattle for him. And somehow this process it's not only creating wealth for George and Mary, but it's spreading into the whole community. It's a for-profit initiative, and it actually works. And I was incredibly impressed to see it. I came running back to Bob Gallucci at Georgetown. I said, Bob, I'm really worried about this because my idea of the underdeveloped world is, we should be charitable, we should be working through foundations, we should be giving. But here these people, they're making money. And worse, they're Israelis in Africa making money. He said, Wes, we've tried everything else. May as well try the profit motive. And in Bob's inimitable way, he was exactly right. As I've looked at this more and more over the last 3 years and traveled in Asia and Africa, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, it has to be profit motive based to have any traction. It's not about giving bags of fertilizer. It's about building entrepreneurs who, for their own self-interest and their own family self-interest, can work and create a system of development. That's what I see. So great opportunities out there. And I'm today affiliated with Eitan Stippy and his group, Vital Capital, and our David Van Adelsberg and Eric Weinberger here in the front row. They've been kind enough to sponsor me coming up, and we're working on these investment opportunities. But I want to talk a little bit broader than this, because for all the great opportunities, we've got some enormous challenges out here. And we're here with the State Department, and for us, as a community of investors, it's an unparalleled opportunity to deliver some important messages to Chris and his team, and through them, the Secretary. So, Chris, don't take anything I say as criticism, because you're doing a lot of things that none of us individually know. It's the way it is. We're working the eaches, state has the big picture. But I think that one of the great outcomes of a convocation like this is that you can collect the individual stories, and you can take them back and you can fold them into the systems that will help us. Because the world has changed a lot with the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, our government, that I was part of, we used business as a weapon of war. It was an ideological weapon. You could send General Motors into South Africa. They would spread Americanism. They brought American executives. They taught English. You had to learn education. You got connected to Detroit. You learned values. You weren't seduced by Marxism, Leninism. In an ideologically polarized world, these values of American business made it as though the corporation was an arm of America. And corporations were different then. They weren't quite judged as harshly on quarterly earnings statements. They weren't really global corporations. They were American corporations and transplants abroad. And when the American communities would set up over there, they'd have baseball leagues and local kids would play. And it was a little part of America. That's different today. The U.S. economy in those days was dominant. And we came out of World War II, 50% of the productive capacity in the world was in the United States. And even though we shuddered and shook with the German economic miracle of the 70s and Japan's explosion of the 1980s, there was no question the American economy was dominant. We traded off the American economy for American national security businesses. We could give away technology, we could give away advantages, we could give away markets in the name of national security policies. Today, it's a lot different. It's a multipolar world. Our corporations are global corporations, the big ones. They're competing globally. They're harshly judged on quarterly earnings and loss statements. One of our speakers yesterday pointed out that something like 70% of the CEOs of major corporations wouldn't invest for the future if it hurt their next quarter's earnings. It's kind of a shocking statement, but it is the atmosphere we live in. The U.S. economy is no longer, we're the largest economy in the world, we're the wealthiest country in the world, but many countries are exceeding our rate of growth, and many countries are improving on our standards of education, and testing on our young people shows we're not at the top in education, not in science, not in math, and worse than that, as we develop more internet technology-based learning programs, we're likely to fall further and further behind. So we've got some big challenges out there. We're also competing against some countries that don't play by our rules. And I hope that we really understand what the implications of this are, because in the Defense Department, we do planning, long-range planning. For example, we have a national inventory stockpile program. So we know what stockpile we need for national security industrial mobilization 20 years out. We don't pay any attention to it. We sold most of those minerals. But our adversaries on the other side do the same thing. They're not really adversaries. They're our closest trading partners. But they know what they need too. It's classified. I have a copy in my office here in Washington, but it's a classified document. It says how much of each mineral they need. They empower state-owned enterprises to go out and acquire those minerals. Their intent is to take these minerals back home under long-term fixed-price contracts and obviate the market mechanism that the rest of us have to live with. And they will eventually raise their exchange rate when it's in their interest to do so. And they'll also produce more for their internal market when they're able to do so. And predictions of their imminent collapse are, in my view, grossly exaggerated. So we're playing in a different arena. When you have 1,000 intelligence agents working to collect key technologies, when every bit of data purchased and hard-earned in the West is subject to being sucked out by internet theft, you're up against a different kind of adversary. And this has to inform our government and the way the government assists our private business community going forward. So in this different environment than what works, well, first of all, I think the profit motive really works, because if you can help people see a way to their future, you keep them motivated the same way you're motivated. And so everything that we are trying to do in my businesses in foreign operations is about doing things for profit and showing the opportunity for those in these other countries to make it on their own. I think if you can bring new services in that aren't there, that works. So obviously, mobile phones, internet, distributed solar energy, where you're not competing with existing power structures, that works. If you think you can go into Pakistan and start a new import business for liquefied petroleum gases, be very careful. Because in Pakistan, as in every other country, somebody's already doing that. They're there on the ground. They own it. They speak the language. Their cousins are in the government, and yours aren't. So there's only certain areas in certain countries where you're likely to be successful. I think extractive industries are really important. Now, I know we're talking about sustainability, but this says impact. And if you want impact, you've got to help these countries get impact the same way we got impact in America. You've got resources, you've got to use them. The question is, can you use them wisely? And so I think the extractive industries are really important. We're just starting to do the mineral developments in many parts of the world. And if you look at a country like Afghanistan and you ask yourself, why would the United States, what's our interest in Afghanistan? We have no economic interest in Afghanistan, but other countries do. It's one of the most mineral-rich countries in the world. It's too bad that the other guys are over there extracting tons of high-grade copper from Afghanistan while we're providing the security, rather than the other way around. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And if you're interested in sustainable U.S. policy and engagement abroad, you have to couple security interests with those kinds of economic interests. But I think extraction industries work. Agricultural development absolutely works. And I want to put a plug in here for high prices for food. Now, some of you are foodies, and you believe that it's important to have the lowest possible price for food because 1 billion people, 1.5 billion people in the world live on $2 a day. I agree. This is a real concern. But if we're going to produce more food, you also have to recognize supply and demand. And the best way to get more food produced is actually to be able to deliver more money to the people who can grow the food to grow the food. And so, as much as I like $2 corn, when corn's at $6, you're going to grow a lot more corn in the world. You're going to be able to put, there's about 1 billion acres of unused agricultural land that's been previously cultivated. And with higher food prices, that land will be returned to cultivation. And so I think agricultural development is a big opportunity. So let's be clear about the obstacles then. Corruption, it's everywhere. It's a matter of degree, but it's a question of how can we work against it. Old laws, especially in Eastern Europe, a legacy of communism, or in Africa, a legacy of colonialism, which either don't apply to new technology, don't apply to extraction, aren't amenable to modern financing methods, for example, don't support home ownership. There's a variety of these issues, thousands of them around the world. Local elites. The thing about it is, just because a country doesn't have a large, powerful mission at the United Nations and doesn't sit on the Security Council, doesn't mean there aren't really powerful people there. They may be the poorest country in Africa, but somebody is going to be very wealthy and very powerful in that country. That's human nature. And so we have to find a way to work with and around and shape the elites. So these are some of the challenges, and I've tried wind industry in Libya, wind projects in Panama and Ecuador, underground coal gasification in Mongolia, housing developments in Africa, agricultural developments in Africa. And like many of you, we know that most efforts don't work the first time. You have to be persistent in this business, and you have to have help. And unless you're ExxonMobil or General Electric or Microsoft and have unlimited resources, when the CEO says, just go over there and get it done, the rest of us are always sort of balancing off risk versus reward. And so this is back now to our government. And so, Chris, I want to just wrap up here by asking you to consider some things that I see, and I would then ask those of you in the audience today, as we go through this session and finish it, keep in mind one of the outcomes here, in addition to the networking and the sharing of opportunities, is let's ask our State Department as cohesively as we can for some help. Here's some of the things I think we need. So it would be really helpful if the United States government could sort of help us understand where the opportunities are and what the competition's doing. So, for example, we don't really understand much about what French development programs are in Africa, or what the Chinese are really doing to develop resourcing in East Africa. I was in Uganda last year, and President Museveni was telling me, we've got oil. Yes. And the Chinese are there. Yes. And we know that this is a so-called resource curse of Africa. So, but we don't know much about it. There's not much easy way to get information. So people in the State Department probably have access to this information, but it's probably not considered mission critical. You'd be more worried in State Department about Al-Qaeda penetration of Uganda than you would about opportunities for development and investment. But in the long term, opportunities for development investment will do more to keep al-Qaeda out of Africa than sending 1,000 troops over there to hunt down some terrorist leader. So, targets. Another thing is the priorities. So, for example, when I go see an ambassador, they're always nice to me. And I hope they're always nice to you. That's their job. They're here to help Americans. But I don't fool myself as to what their priorities are. So normally when you see an ambassador, you go and you say, Mr. Ambassador, this is what we're going to do. He says, oh, that's wonderful. Good luck. And come back and see me if you have any problems. So when you go back and say, I've got a problem, he says, I'll see if I can work it. But this is not like there's a loose nuke in the country. And he goes in to see the president and says, Mr. President, you've got a loose nuclear weapon. Fix it now. No, this is like, Mr. President, General Clark's company, they're having some trouble with, yes, I've heard about that. We'll let the courts take care of that. And the ambassadors come back and said, oh, it's going to be handled by the court system. And then you go back and do your homework on the court system, you see it's, like 75% corrupt. Everybody knows it. It's a game, and it's a matter of priorities. It's a question for the ambassadors and for the U.S. missions of how interested are they relatively in economic development versus how interested are they in relationships. These relationships are really important because what you'd like, I assume, as ambassador, I haven't been one, but when, let's say, the vice president visits your country, you'd like the president of that country to say, I love your ambassador. He's been so helpful. What you would not like is him to say, the ambassador is waiting outside. We're having some difficulties right now. It's like being in the White House press corps and asking embarrassing questions to the president. Everybody cheers and then you get fired. And so here it's the case of what's the priority and how can we help our government have a little bit greater influence there. I think it's also about taking some preemptive steps. So if you were to come in with the economic mission in a country and look at the legal structure and the financial structure, you could probably do a real analysis of it. But my sense is that mostly our economic counselors are understaffed and can't do this. So they're essentially reactive. So when somebody comes in and says, I got a problem with the mining law, I said, oh, mining law? Yeah, I thought that was supposed to be passed last year. So they go back and say, well, what's your problem with it? But there are standards in all of this. There's an amazing amount of work that's done by the international community on financial laws, mining laws, telecommunications laws, but between what's out there as best practices and what's adopted in each country is a huge step. And the more we can encourage countries through our embassies to adopt best practices, the more readily they can receive profitable and helpful foreign investment. But too often, there's a big lag time in that. I think anything we can do with coordination between the various U.S. government agencies also helps our private sector. So I know when I go abroad, often people will say, well, I don't know about this, but you can go to the Department of Commerce on this. You go to the Department of Commerce and say, I'm not really an expert on this, but Treasury knows really about this one. And you say, well, who should I talk to at Treasury? And so you go back and forth. One-stop shopping for the private sector is hard. If I was a big enough company to have a large lobbying firm in D.C. and hire Patton Boggs or some of my lawyer friends, we'd be all set because they know all those people. But it makes it a lot harder for small companies. So anything we can do for one-stop shopping for the private sector helps. And finally, I just say this. Whenever you're doing business abroad, we need good local partners. This is really essential. And anything that our U.S. embassies can do to reach out and help us find the right local partners and stay away from the wrong local partners is really important. Some of that information, believe it or not, is classified. And so when you go into the embassy and you say, I'd like to know about so-and-so, they can't quite tell you, they say, be careful. But they don't tell you why. If they could, they tell you this guy's a major thug and he's in, but go ahead and have a business relationship with him if you want, I said, please don't. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done by the department to really get us moving in this way. Here's the big picture. There's $2 trillion of capital on Wall Street. looking to do something. There's a whole army of U.S. entrepreneurs, well-educated, willing to travel, armed with iPads and Mac Airs, ready to go anywhere to bring business and development. All we need to do is set the right conditions, turn us loose, let the profit motive work, and 21st century America will be more engaged, more effective, more respected in the world even than 20th century America. Now, you have to be careful what staffs say about you. Bill said there's something that my staff said I was, 100% patriotic. My staff also said I'm 100% candid, and 94% of the time it works. So, Chris, I've been 100% candid this morning, and I've laid it out, and I hope you all in the State Department will take it in the spirit in which it's offered. I think there's so many opportunities out here. We've got so many people who want to do so much. It could mean so much for mankind. We've just got to get everything in order. There's no reason that the 21st century isn't America's century, just like the 20th century. We can do it. Give us a chance. Coach, put us in. Thank you.